Yeah.
Good. Okay, thank you for the invite and thank you for everybody who's attended to help out Paula Harris, who has been a friend for many years. And we're basically combined with Desta, most of us have sort of spent our whole lives on this thing. And I appreciate anybody who's helping the people who are trying to move this football down the field. It's actually almost 50 years to the day. It was May the 11th, 1975, when CKY Television in Winnipeg, Manitoba, caught a UFO jumping off the ground, moving in 3 frames from ground level to 5,000 feet in the air. That's what got me interested. We were going to go to Carmen. That's when I said to my friend, "Come on, let's go." Once we saw this film that they had gotten, so it's almost 50 years to the day since I started this thing, and my UFO career has been a transition from one thing to another thing. And when I look back, a lot of it makes sense that it was actually planned that way. It was not, nothing was really random that happened. And so I'm here now on sort of a new sort of pursuit that I've started to tie in near-death experiences, which I'm going to do a little bit today. That when you start looking at the details of UFO contact and out-of-body experience contact or near-death experience contact, it's almost as if you're in the same world. There's a lot of things that are extremely interesting and common. So I'm going to do the Enigma, and the way I look at the UFO phenomena now is we have to redefine reality. What we've done is we've gotten things basically wrong, and it's almost like an equation where if you get an equation and you add in step number one instead of subtracting, you can do all the adding and subtracting and whatever you want. You're never going to get the right answer. You got to get the first thing right, and that is consciousness is primary. And this is something that we've talked about since 2012. Nobody was talking about it before that. It was sort of a taboo subject. And we are now in the situation where consciousness is primary, is now being backed up by a lot of scientific research. So this is not woo idea. This is an idea that we are going to end up being right. The same as we were right about UFOs being real, same as we were right about crafts and bodies, and we were right all along. And all the skeptics are going to end up being wrong on almost every single point. And this is the last one, this whole idea that consciousness is primary to the universe. Consciousness makes the physical world, not the other way around. The way people are taught it in school today is that the physical world creates consciousness. That when the physical world gets complex enough, consciousness sort of jumps out and says, "Here I am, here I am." That's not the way it works. Consciousness is primary. There's actually, if people are taking notes, one of the things you should look up, do a Google search or do an AI search on analytical realism. That is basically what I think is going on. There's a world out there, but it's not made of nuts and bolts. It's made of conscious mind forms, and that we are in fact God. We are parts of God, and we are creating the universe, and that's how it works. So we were there from the beginning when the world was created, and we're in this process of making the world more complex, more elaborate, and we're sort of looking back to ourselves. We are in the one in the God, and we're looking back at all the things that are happening, and the universe just gets more complex and more complex, more grand, and that's what's basically going on. But the universe is basically, if you come down to the latest kind of science, it is not made of nuts and bolts. It's made of people will say energy or waveforms, but it basically, I define it as consciousness. I'm going to skip over this because I've talked about this in a lot of lectures. Anybody who's heard me talk about this is the fact that consciousness is very important in the UFO field. Nobody can really deny it. The Canadian government in November of 1950 wrote a top secret memo that said they were told by American officials that other things might be associated with the flying saucers, such as mental phenomena. So right from the word go, it was known that mental phenomena was part of the UFO story, and that may have been because they had a live alien at Roswell, New Mexico, and the alien was talking in people's heads, and they realized there was this mental phenomena. But if you go back to Adamski and Meade Lane, who started it back in 1947, you'll see the same sort of thing, them talking about consciousness, this idea that the consciousness is the structure that the world is made of. I reference in a lot of my lectures Dr. Eric Walker talking about when we asked him, he was the highest level official that anybody's ever had on UFOs. He was chairman of the board of the Institute for Defense Analysis. which is where DARPA came from. It's where the Jasons came from. He helped develop those groups. He helped Vannevar Bush create defense policy for the U.S. government. Walker said to us at one point, "Let me ask you a question. What do you know about ESP?" And the guy didn't have an answer. And Walker said, "Look, unless you understand about ESP and how it works, you will not be taken in by the control group. Very few people understand how this works." Ben Rich said in 1993, he was asked, "How did the propulsion, how does it get here? How did the crafts get here?" And he asked the same question as Dr. Eric Walker had asked 2 years before. He said, "Let me ask you a question. What do you know about ESP?" And the guy that gave the answer said, "It means everything in time and space is connected." Ben Rich said, "That's how it works. Everything in time and space is connected." He walked out of the building, got in his car, and drove away. James Lukatsky has now gone public in the last 2 years and stated, now that may be because Desta and I put out a book called UFO Sky Pilots, where we talk about people actually flying the craft. I have 36 plus people in that book, and they all say the same thing. You use your mind to fly the craft. The craft is alive, it's conscious. You touch the craft, you become one with the craft, and whatever you think is where the craft will go. James Lukatsky is now confirmed, and he is the guy who ran the OSAP program, the famous $22 million program for the Defense Intelligence Agency. He's now said we've determined that the propulsion system is part physical and part psychic. So this consciousness thing is not as woo-woo as people think it is. It is becoming very mainstream, and it will be the thing that will change everything. Until we get the consciousness thing right, we're always going to get it wrong. We're going to, if we think it's nuts and bolts, lights in the sky, and we're going to count the red ones and green ones and fast ones. We've done that for 80 years. We've wasted 80 years, and you can grab another 100,000 sightings from the sky. It's not going to change anything. You have to get the basics right, that there's something much more complex than just lights flying around in the sky. Desta and I wrote a book called Contact Modalities. And one of the ideas that I want to promote today that I have is that you have a rational, analytical male left brain that sort of runs us in this physical world and it gets us through the physical world. But there's a field out there. And I actually talked to Diane Hennessy Powell, who's one of the authorities on this. And I asked her, "Is there a field?" She said, "Yes, there is a field." She believes there's a field. And the idea is that once you can shut down that male, rational, analytical, ego mind, quiet, people say quiet the mind, but it's not quieting the mind, it's quieting the left side of the brain. Then the female brain, which is in tap with the universe, that believes in oneness and we should work together and love and all these kind of things, will tap in. So all the answers are in the field. There's a field there where all the answers are, and it's the ability to get out of that left brain, to shut it down, get in the field, and sometimes you can get that material as channelers like Desta do, and bring it back into the physical world. So this is an important concept, that there is the experience stuff where people have the experiences. That's the important part. The people sitting on the sidelines who have an opinion, all you can say to them is you can take all your opinion and a dollar and you can't buy a cup of coffee. Opinion means nothing. Everybody's got an opinion. It's the people who are in the field, who have had the experiences, who are the people we need to listen to. Here's Desta. This is the example where Desta has got a number of different ways to get in the field. And I always say, why would you take that off the table? So I contact Desta on a number of different subjects. I use a number of different channelers that I compare the material. I'll get it from one channeler and then I'll send the question off to Desta and say, you go and see what you can get. And the answers are basically the same thing, that this information may come in different forms, but it's basically all saying the same thing. The way I describe how the world works, and I try to get AI to do it. Desta and I are now using AI a lot, but I went through 20 times trying to get this thing to do this thing right. It's basically like we're at, and there's an ocean. So people say there's levels. There's no levels. There's just an ocean. We are in an ocean of consciousness. We are at the bottom of the ocean of consciousness in the dark. We haven't got a clue what's going on. We're making up stories and whatever. And from time to time, people like Desta, or people who have near-death experiences, or people who have samadhi experiences, will suddenly float higher into the water, and they'll, through this experience, they'll flow high into the sort of into the field, and they'll see fish, and they'll say, "Oh wow, fish!" And they'll say to the fish, "What level am I on?" And the fish will say, "What are you, an idiot? You're not on any level. You're in the water. It's no, you're just in the water." And the closer you get to the surface, the higher you get into the field, away from the darkness, the more you can see. And so you have a source that's providing all the information above the water. And the higher you get, the more light there is, and the more you can see. And that's where the way it works. That the people who are at the bottom in the dark think they know what's going on, but from time to time, there's people who get up in the field. And the idea for you and I is to find those people that have been in the field and ask them what's going on. And that's what's happening with contact, with UFO contact, is the contact is telling people what's going on, and they've been totally ignored by the UFO community, and we aren't going anywhere until we start talking to those people. You cannot get anywhere until you talk to the people who are talking to the intelligence behind the phenomena. Here's John Wheeler. John Wheeler was one of the prime physicists of the 20th century. Um, we are participants in bringing into reality not only the near and here, but far away and long ago. He ran experiments that actually, he claimed that these experiments claimed that you can actually change the past, not just what's going on now, but you can actually change the past, that everything is very pliable and very malleable, and it's the ability to tap into this thing. And John Wheeler was a very, very top guy, worked with Einstein and got all sorts of awards. One of the things that I've sort of gotten onto now in the last little while is what I talk about, the noun versus the verb. I had a download experience in 2016 where the phenomena said, you think it's this, it's this. You think it's this, it's this. You think it's this, it's exactly the opposite. This, you think it's this, it's exactly the opposite. And they gave me 24 different things. And this was sort of one of the things that they gave me, noun versus verb. What has happened in our world is that everything is alive, conscious, and one. Everything is alive, it's a verb. But what has happened is the science has come along, and science has turned everything into nouns. So scientists, so they come along and say, oh, that's placebo. That's just nature. That's just evolution. That's just this. That's, and they put names on things. So and what they've done is given everything a name. So you have the small things like atoms all the way up through us to galaxies and stuff like that. Whereas in fact, if you take a look, the universe is actually a verb. It's not a noun. And basically, the verb reality says that everything's alive, everything's conscious, and everything's one. And if you take a look at all the different contact modalities that Desta and I put in the contact modality book, you'll see that this happens in all these fields. It happens in UFOs. People get the impression that everything's live, everything's conscious, everything's one. Psychedelics, I've had that experience, and a lot of people have that. The meditation, near-death experience is very common. That I suddenly realized everything was connected. The grass was talking to me and all this sort of stuff. And this is the whole idea. It's a verb. It's all alive. It's all conscious. It's all moving. There is no dead part. It's all just this one thing, this giant verb that you can call God, the source, whatever. It's made of mind stuff, and it's what the universe is created of. And so what the science does is it changes that. Now here's an expression. This is the way I sort of define it. And this it's all alive. It's all conscious. It's all connected, and it's all perfect. And as my dear departed father would sum it all up, that's all you need to know. Paul Selleck talked about this. This is one of the channelers I watched. Paul Selleck talked about this, and he said the only problem we have in the modern world is separation from the divine. It's all one thing. It's all divine. It's all God. And he says, what you take, whatever and whoever you take and separate from the divine and move into the darkness through the action of co-resonance, you're going to resonate with it, and it will drag you into the darkness with it. What you damn damns you back. What you bless will bless you in return. To say I am divine and you are not is nothing more than the shadow pretending to be the light. So it's all divine, it's all one thing, and we have to realize this whole thing, and then we'll stop trying to steal people's stuff and kill people. Because if you can have somebody as a noun or just a thing, then they don't have a soul, they're not part of God, and we can do whatever we want with them. Everything is divine, everything is part of the one. Deepak Chopra comes out of the Hindu tradition, and he says the same thing even more clearly. Everything is an activity inside consciousness. So a lot of people will say, no, mathematics is primary. He said, no, mathematics is in action inside consciousness. You're inside consciousness, and you do your mathematics, you do your science, whatever. Everything is happening. There's only consciousness, and everything that's happening is an activity, a verb inside consciousness. Here's a neat story that I wanted to present This is the guy that's actually, I think, running now Bigelow's Consciousness Institute. This is a story where I add live consciousness one, and then one that people really have a hard time believing, and that is the fact that everything is perfect. Everything is exactly the way it's supposed to be. We complain about this, we complain about that, and you'll see people in near-death experiences will say it's absolutely perfect. Everything is the way it's supposed to be. But Nick Cook, who wrote the book Hunt for Zero Point, his wife had an experience, and this is what sort of flipped him into the consciousness world. Her mother was dying, and she was holding her mother's hand, and her mother died, and she got up and she said, "Oh, everything's perfect." And she walked out of the room, and he went, "What are you talking about?" And he went racing after her, and he said, "Well, what do you mean? Everything is perfect." And she said, "Well, weren't you there?" And he said, "No, wasn't I where?" Weren't you there too? And she said it was timeless. It stretched to infinity. There was all this information, and you'll see this in experiences with people on board a ship or in near-death experiences where they claim that they had all the answers to everything in the universe. There was all this information. I was connected to everything. I knew the meaning of life. I knew the secrets of the world and the universe, but I could not bring it back with me. This place was more real than real. It was imbued with a feeling that I can only describe as an all-encompassing, joyous love. Now, this is what's called a shared near-death experience, and it's so moved Nick Cook that he started to work on, instead of planes and military and stuff like that, he started to work on this concept of consciousness. And this was this idea. She said everything is perfect. Everything is exactly the way it's supposed to be. I actually did an interview that's on my White House UFO YouTube channel where we have a person with a near-death experience, one guy in a float tank, and a girl who's doing QHHT. They all had that experience. Everything was perfect. And I did an interview with them going over this thing, what they had. So everything is perfect in the world. It's going exactly the way it's supposed to go, no matter how bad it looks. Here's an important thing about you take a look at consciousness and the UFO experience. Experiencers, 60% said during their experience with non-human intelligence, they knew either everything about themselves or everything about the universe. 31% of near-death experience people say at one point during their experience they knew the answer to everything. And so what you basically have is a situation where if you're on board or wherever with a being, and that being gives you the answer to everything in the universe and then takes it back from you when you go back to the world and you're not allowed to take it back, that simply means quite clearly that whatever the intelligence is behind the UFO phenomena knows the answer to everything, because they gave it to this person for a period of time and then pulled it back again. So they know the answer to everything. They're not here to investigate plants, rocks. They're here for a completely different reason. They know what's going on. They know how everything works. They don't have to figure out how DNA works. They know how it works. They're here for a different reason, because it's this idea that if you have the proper technique, you can actually get into this field and pull it out of the Akashic field or whatever you want to call this thing. And a lot of people in a lot of different modalities have described this fact that at one point they knew the answer to everything. I even had two experiences, not quite as dramatic, in psychedelic experiences, where the first they showed it to me and I thought it looked very mechanical, and then the second time they showed it to me and it wasn't everything, but I firmly, easily could understand how everything worked. And so this is an important thing. This is sort of getting to the nature of reality. What's really going on here? Who are these beings? Which is what I'll be talking about tomorrow. Here's Max Planck, who is the father of quantum physics. And this is where I say that science is backing you up. So don't back down on this consciousness thing. Max Planck said, I regard consciousness as fundamental. I regard matter as a derivative from consciousness. We cannot get behind consciousness. Everything we talk about, everything that we regard as existing postulates consciousness. Amen. End of story. Consciousness, nothing gets behind consciousness. So people can talk all they want. What happened with the physicists? All these modern physicists in the early 20th century all believed that consciousness was primary, and then they were told to shut up and calculate. Don't look at the philosophical implications of these calculations. Just use it to create electronics and stuff like that. So science just sort of disregards this whole thing, but this is how it started. Max Planck, and you have Wolfgang Pauli, who was another guy who won the Nobel Prize. The unconscious, one's own, and that of nature are the same reality. And this is oneness concept. Everything is alive, everything's a verb. Here's the guy, Schrodinger, who came up with the famous cat experiment. Consciousness cannot be accounted for in physical terms, for consciousness is absolutely fundamental. It cannot be accounted for in terms of anything else. And Pauli, of course, won the Nobel Prize. So these were the original guys who all came to basically the same conclusion. Here's Schrodinger again. The total number of minds in the universe is one. This is a very Eastern concept that the Atman equals the Brahman. All the small parts are equal to the big part. Here's Wigner, also won the Nobel Prize. It was not possible to formulate the laws of quantum mechanics in a fully consistent way without reference to the consciousness. Then now this changes everything. This changes to the Big Bang. So what happened to the Big Bang? We still have this sort of idea. There was a singularity, and that's a noun. So when they say there's a singularity, you say, who is that? Who the heck is that person? And what horse did he ride in on? They just give it a name and make it go away. Oh, it's just a singularity. Don't worry about it. It's just a singularity. And then there's this, we get this sort of idea that there's an explosion of matter. Well, matter's not primary. And I'll get into that in a bit. John Ramirez. This is the DNA thing. This is one of the things this shouldn't be here, but I'll do it now. One of the key things about the cover up may be, and John Ramirez brought this up. John Ramirez was a top analyst at the CIA. He retired. He is an experiencer, and he started talking about what he had learned in the CIA about stuff and his experience and flying the ship and all this kind of stuff. And he talks about this idea of DNA. That one of the key things that may be stopping the people from disclosing is the fact of the DNA, because if the DNA is the same, then there's a big problem, because the idea that it's all random, it's all accidental. There was just billions, billions, trillions, trillions of accidents, and that's how we got here, and we're here. Therefore, you can't argue with it. But if you suddenly get a second species that has basically the same DNA, then it's a pattern in the universe. And that was one of the things that I was told in 2016. Is it random? Or is it pattern? You think it's random, it's actually pattern. That the DNA is going to be the same. There's stars there's stars here, there's galaxies there's galaxies here, there's DNA there's DNA here, and it means there's a pattern, and the universe is not random. So the Big Bang is this idea that's just randomly exploded, and you had all the subatomic particles, and you had all the laws of the universe, which goes to Rupert Sheldrake talking about uh, um, Terence McKenna, and Terence McKenna calls it the one big miracle. And to say that modern science is based on the principle, give us one free miracle and we'll explain the rest. And the one free miracle is the appearance of all the matter and the energy in the universe and all the laws that govern it from nothing in a single instant. So the science wants to say there's no miracles, there's no God, there's none of this kind of stuff. But what they want is to prove there's no miracles by starting with a giant miracle, that they get all the laws of the universe and the matter and all that kind of stuff, and then we'll explain it from there. Well, no, you don't get the free miracle. You got to start from the beginning and explain where all this stuff comes from. Here's Heisenberg. I think that modern physics has definitely decided in favor of Plato. In fact, the smallest units of matter are not physical objects in the ordinary sense. They are forms. They are ideas which can be expressed and ambiguously only in a mathematical language. Heisenberg is the guy from the uncertainty principle, won the Nobel Prize. Again, one of the original quantum physics people, and basically is saying, as a lot of scientists are now saying, that electrons and protons are not pieces of matter. They're energy forms inside, energy deviations inside an energy field. Everything's a field. That's where you got quantum field theory and stuff. And the idea that matter even exists has now sort of gone by the wayside. The verb reality, again, we had this whole thing. It's alive, conscious. The noun reality is to say, no, it's not alive. No, it's not conscious. Everything is separate. It's just these little balls, and they're banging into each other from time to time, and everything is random. And anything that says that this is not true, like UFOs, psychic phenomena, meditation, psychedelics, is all pseudoscience. So they use another word, and they basically just give it a name and make it go away. But you have to sort of stop them and get them to define what these things are that they're using, whether it's placebo or spontaneous remission and stuff. What they're doing is they give it a name and make it go away, and that's the way they walk around it. Now, one of the key concepts that in reality and how reality works is the key message from the UFO experiencers, from the intelligence that is here. The number one message that they are giving us, I am absolutely convinced, is oneness. The idea of oneness versus separation, and that's this whole idea. Are you part of this one thing, or is everything random and separate? Um, David Bohm says the notion, and David Bohm was a top physicist in the 20th century, the notion of a separate organism is clearly an abstraction, as also is its boundary. In reality, the flow of life is a single unbroken wholeness. Albert Einstein said a human being is a part of the world, what we call the universe. He experiences himself, his thoughts, and his feelings as something separated from the rest, a kind of optical delusion of his consciousness. That was even Albert Einstein. This is the Eastern philosophy, the idea that Atman is Brahman, that you have the big part is all made up of the little parts, but it's all the same thing. It's a fundamental concept. Bashar, the Chandler Bashar, one of his 5 laws of creation, specifically the third law, says the one is the all, and the all are the one. This concept that it's all one thing, it's all part, everything is part of one thing. Here's the survey that was done of 3,200 experiences, and that's what you need to do, because that's when you start to see the patterns. 3,200 experiences were asked this whole thing about what was the main message that was given to you. 54% said oneness. Oneness and love were talked to 54% of people claimed that contact. Now this one is, hang on, this bar is in the way here. Let's get rid of this bar here. Did you feel very connected to, do you feel very connected to all living things? And you'll get this with people in out-of-body experiences, near-death experiences, and UFO experiences, where they'll suddenly feel connected to everything, that they can sense aura fields and stuff like that. And this comes from the experience that opens this, sort of shuts down this left side or opens up the veil, and these people are able to go from there. Now this bar, now I got to move this bar back up. What the heck's going on here? Come on. So let me adjust this. I got this bars in the way here. Oh, here we go. Even the Bible talks about the concept of oneness. This is Matthew 25, which has sort of been forgotten by the world today, and that's this idea. The king will reply. Jesus is telling this parable about the king. The king will reply, "Truly I say to you, whatever you did for the least of these, my brothers and sisters of mine, you did it for me." And then he will say to those on his left, "Depart from me, you accursed, into the fire, eternal fire prepared for the devil and his angels. For I was hungry, and you gave me nothing to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me nothing to drink. I was a stranger, and you did not invite me in. I needed clothes, you did not clothe me. I was sick and in prison, you did not look after me." And so the disciples are saying, "So Lord, when did we see you hungry and thirsty, or a stranger, or needing clothes, or a sick, or in prison, and did not help you?" And he replied, "Truly I tell you, whatever you did not do for the least of these, you did not do for me." And it's this concept that whatever you do to the poor, you've done it to Jesus, whether you do it positively or negatively, this thing that everything is connected to one thing. This is one that Desta's father showed me. He said this is a book I should read, the Tao Te Ching, and I never got past the first page because I was so overtaken by the first part of the first page. It is one of the most important things I have ever read. This is the idea of the Tao, and that could be conceived as God or the way. And if you take it that way, then this really makes a lot of sense. So it says the Tao that can be named is not the Tao. And this is the idea. It's not a noun. The Tao that can be named, if you can name it, turn it into a noun, it's not the Tao. The name that can be named is not the eternal name. The nameless is the beginning of heaven and earth. And the Tao is the mother of 10,000 things. And in China at the time, that 10,000 was the biggest number. So it basically translates to the Tao is the mother of all things. And this is this concept of the Tao is nameless, it's alive, and that there are nouns that come from it, but that you cannot define the Tao as a noun. It's a live, it's a verb. It is all that is. Heisenberg again said the reality that can be put into words is never really reality itself. And that's this idea that we cannot define reality. We're always defining something between us and reality. Donald Hoffman is the main scientist today who's promoting this idea. He said, now imagine that every object that you see, an apple, a phone, your hand, is analogous to an icon on a computer desktop. You see something that makes it possible to operate effectively, but you don't see reality. So this is the idea that you're driving a video game car, and you think you're driving the video game car. You're not driving the video game car. This is all in between you and reality. That basically, when it comes down to it, you cannot see reality. You're always describing it with a noun, something in between that gives you the idea of how that reality actually works. But nobody can actually see reality. Niels Bohr, another guy, he's came up with the idea of the atom, the atomic atom, won the Nobel Prize. Isolated material particles are abstractions, their properties being definable and observable only through their interaction with other systems. So you cannot pick up a proton or electron unless it's another field, and then you can pick it up. And that's this idea that they're not material particles the way we think they are. And here's one from Desta, and we should read this. Of course, we always got to go to Desta. And here's her, and I'm pretty sure this was Desta. The one source is having infinite numbers of experiences, and you are all connected because you are all this one source reflecting on itself. You are all shards of source, wanting to experience different realms and interacting with itself in an infinite number of different situations. But the ones that you are interacting with are not other humans. They are still source. You perceive these as other humans, as separate from yourself, but they are not. You are all coming from source. You reflect source. A reflection of the one is seemingly different forms which you perceive as friends and foes. However, you are source interacting with itself. You are all unique, yet you are all one. And that's why I say you start looking at the channel material, you see that the same principle, almost like everybody's saying the same thing. And that's because everybody's gotten into this field and they pulled the actual answer from the field. This is the answer in the field. But if you're a rational, analytical person who's never had an experience, you're sitting on the sidelines, being skeptical and think you know when in fact you have no clue because you have had not had the experience. The only people that know are the people who've had the experience. That's where you have this whole idea where we've turned this into sort of an atheist world. And Heisenberg, who won the Nobel Prize, said the first gulp from the glass of natural science will turn you into an atheist. But at the bottom of the glass, God is waiting for you. And that's what you find in the UFO thing. The more you look at this, the more it looks like Jeffrey Kripal from Rice University, who said a year ago, and it woke me up a year ago, and he said, this is going to be ontological. Why would it not be? And I'm thinking, you're right. Absolutely. How can you move UFOs out of the thing about where we came from, where we go after we die, and all the rest of it? It's all part of reality. What's actually going on? Where do we come from? Where are we going? And what are we doing here? And that's the whole thing that the UFO phenomena brings. It brings us to that question that we spend all the time trying to figure out what's actually going on. How does reality work? This I want to bring up because this has just happened, but I'm just going to spend a couple minutes on it. As you probably know, the guy who ran the Canadian government UFO program was Wilbert Brockhouse Smith. He was an experiencer. He was talking to beings. They were giving him information, and he wrote a book called The New Science. And he died in 1962. The last couple chapters were never finished. So I didn't realize this was going on. I'm dealing with Mark Sims. Mark Sims had an experience with a being by the name of Tejabar. He was at an event with Stephen Greer, a CE5 event. He saw an object which he believed that he was the only one that saw, and he believed that the light saw him, and so he went back and he did protocols in his hotel room, and this being appears, and the being is with him for 13 days, and it gives him and it's not an extraterrestrial. It's a being from 4,000 6,000 years ago on Earth, and it gives them how the universe is actually formed, this whole idea about consciousness and how things form and how it goes through these different levels until you get to the point where beings are creating galaxies. And so he was working on that. He wrote a book on that, and then he started working on the Smith stuff and realized that it connected. And what has happened, this is happening now at Contact in the Desert. Danny Sheen is going to introduce this book. What he's done, if you know, Mark Sims is a big computer guy, and he's got this really, really super smart kid that's working for him, and they've put together an AI program, and they've actually finished the book. So this is the book. It's one of the rarest books in the UFO community. I have two copies. I gave one to Mark Sims, and there are almost no books. There may be 12 books in the world of the new science done in 1964, but the new book is coming out with the rest done by artificial intelligence, and it's being introduced at Contact in the Desert, and the money will be going to the Paradigm Institute that Danny Sheehan runs. And so you have this thing, and basically it fits in with what Desta said. All this stuff I talked about, the quantum physics, it's the same thing. It's you see it fits together, and the Teja stuff fits completely into the what Wilbur Smith was told back in 1950 to 1954 from an alien by the name of Alpha. Uh, Again, he already knew, he'd been told that mental phenomena was involved. So of course that's where he went. He listened to people who had mental phenomena things where they were channeling and they were getting messages. And why would you not listen to these people? And one of the things that we have actually got from AI, which I was using, I was Googling around, and they pulled a Wilbur Smith portal equation out of there. And I sent it to Mark, and he said put it to his super whiz kid that's working for him, and they've figured this out. And so we may actually have now a formula for a portal. And this is the equation that came. I'm trying to get AI to explain where they got it from. They claim it's coming from Wilbur Smith, but I've never seen it, and very, very interesting stuff. This is Teshabar, and as I'll explain tomorrow, when you start looking at aliens and the descriptions of them, it makes no sense whatsoever as to what people are describing. It couldn't work the way people are saying it. And then you start to wonder, what are we really looking at? What are we really dealing with here? This is the map that Tejabar gave to Mark Sims after 13 days, and Mark put it all in this chart, and this will all be coming out in books. But it basically explains how the universe is built out of this consciousness and up from smallest elements up to galaxies. Jacques Vallée I used to think Jacques Vallée was crazy before I had my consciousness download experience in 2012. Jacques Vallée said the UFO phenomena is a manifestation of a form of consciousness that we do not understand. So Jacques has been saying this for almost his whole career. And Jacques not a stupid guy. Fear versus love. I just want to do one thing, and this is I'm going to quickly slip over this, but basically you have the world is you have all the people, especially in near-death experiences, talking about love is the basis of the universe. This is how it works. This is how it's powered by love, and what we've replaced it with is fear, and that's what you're seeing with the disclosure movement in the United States. That's why they're ignoring the experiencers, because the message is not the same. What they want is a message of fear, 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 fear. Evil aliens are going to eat you. They're going to do this, to that, and no stuff. And that's what they're going for. They're going for money, for research funding, in terms of trying to get it. So I wanted to point this out. This my impression on what this thing, because they didn't go to the Science and Technology Committee. They went to Armed Services and Intelligence, and that's all weapons and evil people, and that's what they're basically doing. And there's this, this famous expression: once you sell people fear, you can buy, they'll buy just about anything. Um, this is the latest, the last part of my presentation: why matter isn't the answer and what lies beyond. This is Mead Lane back in the 1940s already, and they already had this figured out. The Etherians can form etheric matter into any desired form, temporary, solidifying it into into visibility and tangibility. These forms are thought constructs shaped by will and intelligence. That is this thing I mentioned, analytical realism. If you look that up, that's basically what this is. And this is the whole idea that God created the sparks of the divine. Then we left the source and we went out and we created the universe. God does not create the heaven and the earth. God creates the sparks of the divine, and we're the ones through thought forms that are creating the heaven and the earth. And we can create the good and the bad, and that's what's actually happening. This is be one of Paula's uh, uh, country people who got into this as well. Federico Fagin, who is one of the smartest technological people. He is the guy that came up with the first uh, um, um, for the computers, these the conductor, what do they call it? The boards where they have all the transistors in there. Semi processor. He was the first guy to develop it. He's also developed touch screen computer stuff. Extremely smart guy, had a very dramatic UFO, not a UFO, spiritual experience. If you listen to his interviews, he'll talk about this, where he suddenly realized that he was the consciousness out there, and he was the consciousness in his body, and he's got going on consciousness. And he makes the very important point where a lot of people will talk about the fact that AI is going to create consciousness. AI will never create consciousness, and Federico absolutely points this out, and he actually gets very excited when he starts talking about, and he says they will never do it because a transistor is nothing but a switch. It's a switch, off, on, off, on, off, on. It doesn't even know it's a switch. How can it create artificial intelligence? How can it create? You need a cell, and he talks about the fact that the cell of the human body, and this is true, the cell of the human body can create another human body. It has all the information for the entire system, whereas the transistor has its own little thing, off, on. It doesn't know what's going on in the rest of the thing. It doesn't even realize it's part of a computer. So Fagin points out the fact that this is the idea that it's going to be a cell-like thing, and that's what you get with the UFO thing. When you take a look at the ships, they're artificial, they're conscious, and in order to get artificial intelligence that can think and grow and stuff like that, you're going to need biological material. Biology is the bottom of this thing. You cannot do it with switches because switches don't know anything about themselves, whereas a cell in the human body has all the information. And if you take the cells all the way back to the first cell, undivide them, all the way back to the first cell on Earth, that cell created all the physical, all the biological material on the Earth, and it had the information for all that. And so you see the power, even just of a single cell, compared to the power of a transistor. Here is the microprocessor, the Intel 4004, and he's completely, if you talk to him, he's right on board with what we're saying about the primacy of consciousness and how we don't understand consciousness. And he's going to spend the rest of his life, he's in his 80s now, trying to add to the answers to this problem. This is the one where, if you haven't seen the book, this is the Sky Pilot book, where I take 36, Desta and I put together 36 people who had flown the craft. And when I asked them, how do you fly a craft? They all said exactly the same thing. You fly it with your mind. You're inside the craft, and there's somebody behind you. And this, I firmly believe, is going to be a spirit guide. It's not an alien or a human. And the person behind them is telling them what to do, and they're to touch something. And the weird thing was that I had 36 people, nobody touched the same thing in the craft. You touch the craft is alive, it's conscious, it's one. And if you actually listen to Jack Sarfati, tells a story about one guy, a Navy guy, who claimed that he was part of this program, that the craft not only is conscious, it has its own free will, and that unless you have the right mindset, it ain't opening the door. And that's when you hear a story that was told by James Lakatsky, where he talks about a meeting in a congressional facility in 2011. And the meeting was about the fact that we'd gotten inside a saucer. And when I heard this story about the saucer not letting people in, I'm thinking 2011, they didn't figure this out until 2011, the craft, because you have to have the right mindset to get in the craft. And this is the whole thing. It's all this consciousness thing. So that's what artificial intelligence is going to look like. If we see what these descriptions of these people talk about in the book, that's what you're going to see. And this is this idea. You can go from here to the other side of the universe instantaneously, the same as you can in a near-death experience, inside an out-of-body experience. What you think is where you go. As soon as you think it, you're there. And so we are on the cusp of new knowledge, and I think that's why the government has now released the psionics thing. So this book came out, and then it was in the public, and suddenly the government comes out and says, "Hey, we're using psychics, we're using people to bring these things in, and the craft is alive." And we had this is in our book already, so it may have been because this book came out, they decided to put these people out to talk about the fact that the government already knows this, that the craft is conscious and alive. A couple of little things on time and space, because when you go into out of body experience, UFO experiences and stuff like that. Chris Bledsoe, for example, told me he was gone for 4 hours in 2007 during his experience. And he said, Grant, I'll tell you what, he said, when I was gone, it was 4 months when I was gone. That's how long it was. It appeared to be 4 months. It was only 4 hours. And you see this thing about time and space, and you start to wonder, is there time and space? Is there such a thing? If you have a dream, in your dream, is there time and space? And you go, well, yeah, there's time and space. And then you think, where's the dream taking place? Is there time and space? No, there's no time and space. And this whole thing. Are we creating? Are we living? Are we creating our own reality? As Stephen Greer used to say with the Sufi expression, you see yourself as a puny form when within you is enfolded the entire universe. So the thing is the universe out there or is it within ourselves? Einstein, to those of us who believe in physics. He wrote this just before he died, a couple weeks before he died. To those of us who believe in physics, he wrote in 1955 to a family of a friend who had recently died. This separation between past, present, and future is only an illusion, if a stubborn illusion. Here's one of the testimonies. This Danny Sheehan tells a story about a guy that there's a craft that's on the ground, a recovered craft. It's about 30 feet in diameter. He goes inside and it's gigantic inside. It's like the size of a football stadium inside. Chris Bledsoe's told me the same thing. There's a couple of other people that tell this story, and even Hal Puthoff admits this is actually taking place. That the craft is way bigger on the inside than it is out the outside, which says that there's something wrong with our physical understanding of the universe. It's not quite as physical as we think it is. If you can make the craft as big as you want on the inside, and people will describe. Susie Hansen describes being inside the craft, and they said, "Watch this, Susie. We're gonna make the craft bigger." And she said the walls started to move out, move out, move out, move out, and she said it got so big she couldn't see the walls anymore. It was that big. And so this is the whole idea that uh, what this phenomena is doing is it's indirectly telling us what's going on. It's creating awe and curiosity, and that makes us research because unless there's awe and curiosity, nobody's going to do any investigation. So Paula and Desta and I and all the people probably in the room are all scrambling around trying to figure what's going on, and we're all putting it together. And as we put it together, the consciousness rises, and eventually we sort of figure it out. And at 95% of people know, then everybody makes the right decision. That's what they're doing. They're making us figure it out rather than landing and giving us a left brain lecture. Um, the channel Seth, space and time. This bars my way again. Space and time are both root assumptions, which simply means that a man accepts both and assumes his reality is rooted in a series of moments and dimensions in space. Your inner experience is translated in those terms. So Seth was the first sort of New Age channeler, and that was one of the famous expressions. The other one that Seth says, you manifest everything around you. There is no other rule. Hang on, let's move ahead here. This is my lesson that I learned from my little grandson when I saw this, and I'd never realized until I saw this photo that if you're a little child, if you do a lot of research, I did when I was very young, I did research on dying people, you realize that very young children below 5 years old really don't have any fear of death. And that is because they live in the present moment. They live here now. That's all. Give me this, give me that, cry if you don't get it. And they're basically, and what we do is we live in a world where we have past, present, future. So the past we live and we have all sorts of depression about what's happened before us. We have the present where we're stalled and procrastinating. And then we have the future, which causes tension and anxiety. And young children will live in the actual moment of time. And that's what all the mystical traditions will tell you. Here and now, live in the here and now. And that's where the joy is because you don't have any tension because you're not in the past or in the future, and you don't have any depression because you're not in the past. Tejbar, let me read this. What I'm not. Your thoughts are very powerful in that they influence the creation of the now, the only reality. This is why it is so important to think positively in the moment and about the future. This is the key to happiness. Wish for good things for yourself and for those you love. Never let anger, sadness, frustration, or depression stay with you for long. In short, your thoughts create your emotions, your reality, and they contribute to the universal reality. You can see that in the United States in the last 10 years. You can see that the ideas have changed in the United States, and with the ideas have come the entire society has completely shifted. And that is because people started to believe things and other people jumped on, and now you have a situation where a lot of people have one view and have other views, and you can see how belief systems can change actual reality of entire civilizations. And um, this is one of the things that Smith was told. Awareness can be changed through exercise of awareness itself. So he was getting the same sort of messages back in the early 1950s. We think this is the latest thing, but this has been going on with a lot of people. Ditchfield was a guy who had a near-death experience who basically was dragged under a train. His coat got caught in a high-speed train in England. He got dragged underneath, and a couple of weird things happen that you see in UFO experiences and near-Earth experiences, and that is the fact that there was no time. It was only a couple of minutes, and it was seemed to go on for endless periods of time. And that when he came back, he suddenly was able to do exquisite art. And you see this over and over again with different cases in the paranormal where he had no talent for art, none whatsoever. And he's very similar. He had the dyslexic. He was dyslexic, the same as Doug Alt, and Doug Alt has he's an experiencer, and he has award-winning paintings that he has done. This is another one where you see this situation. This is Akiana Kramark. A bizarre story. If you've never seen this story, she actually disappeared. As people come to UFO lectures and maintain that she was abducted, and absolutely maintained this is what happened. But she said she was with God. She was with a ball of light. It took her through the galaxy and through the universe and showed her 1,000 faces to paint. And this is a painting she did at 8 years old. It was, I think, valued at $5 million at one time, and then it was stolen. She painted it again, but she started, and she had this awakening where she wrote 2 books of poetry at 7 years old, and she could do this unbelievable art after this experience of being taken. And she reappeared in the house. They had guard dogs, they had police and stuff looking for her, and she reappeared in the hallway, and she had this art thing. And the other thing that is weird with these things is that Ditchfield suddenly was able to do music. He had a musical symphony in his head called The Divine Light, and it stayed in his head for years. And he was able to recreate this thing with no background in music. Other people did it, the same as Stuart Sharp. If you've heard this, if Desta and I ever do a second music book, we'll do Stuart Sharp. He had his son die in childbirth. His wife was still in the hospital. He was trying to, nobody would bury the kid. He had him in a little shoebox, and he was devastated, and he was running around trying to bury this kid. And then he finally gets him buried, and then he goes to sleep. And these beings that had been visiting him since he was a young kid came. He called them the snow people. And he said they came, and they said sometimes when people have these experiences, we give them a gift. And he carried a symphony called the Angeli Symphony. You can hear the London Philharmonic Orchestra playing it. He took him 20 years. He raised £1 million to get it scored. He had no musical background, and it took him 20 years to put the whole thing together. And it was the only time the London Philharmonic Orchestra ever stood up and applauded a composer. So you get these bizarre things where people get these unbelievable abilities to paint and to do music after very traumatic experiences. And in the book Contact Modalities, Desta and I spent a couple chapters talking about this trauma. And you can believe it or you don't have to believe it, but it's true. Trauma is a big thing. You say, we don't want any trauma, we just want everything good. But it is through trauma that a lot of these awakenings take place, whether it's going through the front windshield of a car or whether it's encountering a being or whatever it is. A lot of times it will shift, it will rip the veil, and people will pick up all sorts of abilities and talents. And trauma is definitely a part of the paranormal. The telepathy tapes, Paulo is going to try to get this the people involved with this uh, Kai Kai what's her name?
Okay.
Anyway, yeah, the producer, and she was going to come, but then what happened was this thing took off. So a lot of people believe that the UFO community is losing ground, that we're nobody pays respect to us. The telepathy tapes is the key thing to this whole idea about telepathy, about non-local thought, which is experienced by people in near-death experiences on board ships and stuff like that, where there's the telepathy taking place. And what you take a look as you see that we're actually making headway on this whole thing, that it may be the beginning of the end for the people who are really skeptical and anti-paranormal. And that is the fact that they've got 6 different universities that have been offered. These kids are nonverbal autistics, and because they're nonverbal autistics means it's in the left brain because that's where your speaking center is. So the left brain male thing is sort of shut down or injured or whatever, and these kids are 100% telepathic. They do not make mistakes, and their testing is going on right now. And if you take a look at this whole thing, how consciousness shifts, it shifts one funeral at a time, as Max Planck said. It doesn't even by convincing people. It goes one funeral at a time. People die off, and the new generation is not offended. In on Christmas Day, to the Telepathy Tapes episode hit 1.5 million listens on Christmas Day, more than Rogan. It was the biggest telecast in the world. So now it's very hard to get Kai Dickens to do interviews and stuff because she's just overwhelmed with all sorts of offers, and they're doing a documentary on these children, and that will change everything. The fact that you have this nonverbal thing that we can be 100% telepathic. And the other thing that these kids do, and I knew this because I had worked on this before, I think we even have them in contact modalities, these kids. They talk to dead people. They speak in other languages. So explain that, how a kid can talk in another language and he can't button his shirt. He's never left the house. They're 100% accurate. They prove that consciousness is primary, and they proved this whole idea that the paranormal is the Super Bowl, and that we're in this story, that we're on the leading edge of the biggest story that's ever been told. Now, a little bit on near-death experiences, because the more I look at it, the more I see near-death experiences are very closely linked to UFO experiences. Eben Alexander is the most famous experience of near-death experience. People don't know he actually encountered beings. I don't know what these beings were, but aliens or beings or whatever in his near-death experience, and the publisher made him pull it out. So you do have these people having encounters during near-death experiences. Um, Near-death experiences, you have 37% of all experiencers say at one point during the experience they knew the answer to everything in the universe, or no, that they had a near-death experience. 37% of experiencers said they've had a near-death experience. So the question is that random or is that chance? Is it random that you suddenly got dragged into the UFO thing, and is it random that you had a near-death experience, and is it random that you had two of them? And most near-death experience people that I've met in the UFO field have had two near-death experiences. And so this is this whole deal that these people seem to be picked for this. And what you'll see in these, if you look at these near-death experiences, you start to see exactly what you find in the UFO experiences, is that these people are told you volunteered for this. Like the one person said, "I don't want to go back. I don't want to go back. No, I want to stay here. I don't want to go back to life." And they said, "You volunteered to go back." And he said, "I volunteered to go back." "Yeah, you volunteered. When? Before you were born." And this whole idea that it's starting to look at the reincarnation world, that you're coming into the world with all sorts of plans, that you plan to do this, you plan to do that, and that's how you have a near-death experience and a UFO experience, because you plan to come in here at this time in this place in the middle of this mess for possibly to help out. And these are the ways that you're coming in. This is Whitley Strieber. This is this reflection idea that what you put out is reflects back. So you get Anne's statement about death. She said she read all the letters. There was a couple 100,000 letters when Communion was printed. They sold 2 million copies. They got 200,000 letters, and she read all these letters. She came out and she said, "Whitley, whatever we're dealing with here has something to do with death." Now, Whitley's own experience. I asked him when I interviewed him about a month back. I asked him this thing about his experience. I said, "Whitley, you were a horror writer. You wrote horror novels, and you had this very traumatic, horrible experience when you had your experience with the communion thing. And then you have other people who are very religious and they have very positive experiences. And the whole idea is, are you reflecting? Are you developing that experience yourself? Are you part of the experience, or are you a victim?" And you can get a lot of people who will talk about seeing dead people on board a ship. And Brett Oldham saw his dog, and he was very upset. He thought they're using they're using his dead dog to trick him. But you'll see a lot of people will say they see dead people on ships, and you see dead people on ships, relatives and stuff, then we're into a whole different statement. And the thing is, we got to figure out, why is this happening? It's basically giving you a hint. It's not the way you think it is. That's why there's a dead person there. We want you to think, what's going on here? How does this stuff all connect together? Now let me go to next slide here. This is the whole thing about I think it's the out of body experience. You find these patterns of out of body experience. Yeah, OBEs. 80% of all experiencers say they've had a out of body experience. So you got to say, is that a random thing, or is that part of the whole thing? A lot of people, when I talk to experiencers, I always ask them the question. Are you on a mission? Do you think you're on a mission? And most people say to me, yeah, I think I'm on a mission, but I don't know what it is, or I'm on a mission and I'll tell you what it is. And they're on this sort of road to something they came here to do. And so you get a different impression of what's actually going on here that people are doing. Mike Clelland actually asked them the question, on a scale of 1 to 10, what's your sense of mission? And he said most people answer 11. 360-degree vision. This is one of the things you see in out-of-body experiences. You see it in the people who read cards with the blindfold reading. They can do this from any 360-degree point. They can tell you what the color is with the blindfold on. And it's also seen in people who've flown the ship, people who've been on board the ship, and they say it's the weirdest thing. I just can't figure out how it worked. But it was 360. They could see in 360-degree vision. And that is something, if you're going to make up a story about being on a UFO or having an out-of-body experience, that's not something you want to throw into your experience. But you see these weird things that everybody seems to be describing this 360-degree vision. Then you come to the dream thing where you get the dream signs, where if you want to get lucid in a dream, and this sort of fits into how this all works, if you want to get lucid in a dream, what you got to do is you got to get the dream sign. And the dream sign is the weird thing that happens in the dream that you're supposed to pick up that you're dreaming. Mine, it was always the same thing. My dead father would appear in my dreams when I was trying to do the lucid dreaming. And every time I come back and I go, how can I not figure this out? I my dead father. I should know I'm dreaming. And this is the whole deal is that in all what I'll show you tomorrow is with the beings and stuff, there's dream signs all over the place. And what they're trying to get us to know is the same thing as in your dream to go to the lucid dream, is that we are in a dream. You're not seeing things the way you're supposed to see it. And they put these weird things in the stories that they're telling to get you to get the idea, hey, this is not like this whole thing at 360 degrees. This doesn't make any sense. You can't do this in this world. And it's a dream sign is to say, hey, something's going on. Maybe I'm in a dream. Maybe there's some other reality that I'm not seeing. One of the weird things that they show is that this is taken just outside Skinwalker Ranch at a ranch there from a security camera, and what you see is a shadow figure. And the thing is, the shadow figure's got a hat. So the question is, if you're and I asked Chris Bledsoe when he had a shadow figure, I said, "Did you see the guy with a hat?" He said, "Oh yeah, I saw that guy." And it's like if you're a shadow person and you're living in the shadow world, why do you need a hat? And here's another one that was taken from the same security camera, and you can see this is that guy's in it's like 2 dimensions at the same time, but he's got a hat on. And this is the weird thing where all these sort of things are there are to make us awe and curious and try to get us to figure. This is Stan Romanek. I asked him about, hey, did you have any shadow people? And his wife said, yeah. He wanted to start laughing. You want to see some photos? This is one of Stan's. This is a shadow person on the left hand side there. This is another one where the Sasquatch was taken by the same guy with those security camera things, and you get it, and then you can actually see it. This one you can actually see the fur on it, and that was taken. And the question is, what are they actually doing? I mean, is it actually an animal that needs to eat and it's walking around, or is it there for the person to see? Time melts away in dream states, in UFO states, in near-death experience states, and this is the whole thing it's hammering your reality and saying you're not seeing reality the way it actually works. It's more complex than what you see. A lot of people in both in the near-death experience and in the UFO experience have messages of spiritual or planetary importance. They all come back with these messages they want, and they're told to give the messages. They're told to go and write a book. They're told to go and tell people about it. That's what they're doing. They're trying to raise consciousness. So people are all telling these weird stories. Everybody tells the stories, and the consciousness is rising, whether people will believe it or not. um, After effects. You get these things with near death, same with near death experience. Well, how does this work? So we always knew that people on board a ship would come back and they would disturb electronics. They'd always say, Stan Romanek, they would always say, I was going to go see him. And they said, just don't let it touch your computer. If he touches your computer, it's gone. And it was like, so this is the whole, and high divorce rates, 75 to 80% of near death experience people have divorce. PTSD, they suffer from PTSD, same as experiencer people suffer from PTSD, or they are able to heal and they're able to get healed. They're healed, and that's what you see. You see this trauma thing. It's not a straight thing of good stuff. It's this idea that these things are happening, and what's the chances that you get people who disturb electronics who are UFO people, and then you get near-death experience people who have the same report the same thing. I can't wear a watch. I can't touch electronics. I disturb it. It's the exact. There's two different phenomena altogether, and you start to wonder: is this connected? Is it the same phenomena? And that's where I'm starting to go. That all this stuff is really deeply connected. Information downloads, rapid image cycling, I won't get into that. That is a big thing, but I just saw that in near-death experiences that this rapid image cycling takes place, where they are showing you message images a hundred, 1,000 at a time, and they teach you how to get these images, and that's how they download this huge amounts of information into people, and it happens all over the place. It happens in near-death experiences. It happens in out-of-body experiences. It happened with the two of the girls in the case in the uh, Rhodesia in 1994. Two of them had the rapid image cycling. They were given messages, one on technology, the other one got it on environmental stuff, these massive rapidly imaging flashing in front of them. Good versus evil. I just want to get this because everybody asked me this question. I think we can sort of end here because people always ask me about the good and evil thing, and people taking against their will. So I always use three examples, and then we maybe if there's time we'll take questions. But one of the ones was one of the big guys that complains about this is Jim Semivan, who is this. He was the equivalent of a two-star general at the CIA. He has these beings in his room in the early 1990s. He goes to Ron Pandolfi. He goes to everybody in the CIA. He wants to know what's going on, what this is all about, and they tell him leave it alone. It'll just ruin your career. And he's actually the guy that goes, and he's the guy that put out the New York Times article. He's behind all the disclosure that's taking place in Washington right now. They used to call him the big man. Before he went public, I knew who he was, and he went to all the three-letter agencies, to the top guys, and he said, "You guys can't get this out. We're going to drop this thing. We're going to disclose. We're going to drop this thing. We're not going to release classified material, but we're going to drop this thing." And when he talks about his experience, he said, "It's terrible, terrible. They didn't ask my permission. They just came in and they violated my humanity and on and on." And he said, "I'm still 30 years later. I'm still upset about this whole thing." And I say it's one of the most important sightings that ever took place, because if they had not come into his room and did whatever they did, would he have gone to the CIA and all these different agencies and said, "We're going to drop the UFO subject," and force disclosure? No, because you have to have an experience. And a lot of these experiences, because they happen and you don't understand what's going on. And the other thing he says, it came against his will. And the immediate question was, "Well, you're the CIA," and he laughs about going across the world and stealing stuff and doing all this kind of stuff. Well, you steal stuff and spy on people. I mean, did you ask for permission when you're running around the world taking stuff from other countries? The other one that I want to give the example is Sherry Wild. She wrote a book called The Forgotten Promise. And that is this whole thing that might underlie all this, that all the people in the room, myself, Desta, and Paula, all have this situation where we volunteered to come in and do this. Sherry Wild wrote a book called The Forgotten Promise, and she fought it every step of the way. They were trying to get her to write a book and stuff. She said, "I'm not writing your damn book. You can write your own book. I'm not writing your book. Get out of here. I don't want to deal with you." And they said, "Sherry, have you forgotten the promise that you made?" And this is the sole idea. She had made this promise that she was going to come into the world. She was going to write this book, and she was going to get this message out to raise the consciousness. And the other one is the most bizarre one I've heard is Mike Cleland. Mike Cleland, you'll know him as the owl guy, and he for many years had seen grays and stuff, and he didn't know what was going on, and he was always second guessing everything. And he has an experience a couple of years back where he's camping on the side of the Utah interstate, and he wakes up in the middle of the night and he sees what looks like a UFO sitting on top of a hill, and he said, "It looks like a UFO," and he goes back to sleep again. And next thing he realizes, he's out of his body, he's floating above his body, which is again this thing about, is this connected out of my experience? And he's above the UFO, and suddenly he's inside the UFO, and he's with two grays, one on one side of him, one on the other side of him, and they're walking him down this hall. And he's walking down the hall. Mike Cleland is 6 feet tall. These beings are 3.5 feet tall. He's walking along, and he said there's a gray suit hanging on a hook on the side of the hall. And he said, as we walked past that suit, he said, "I don't know what happened, whether I put it on or what happened." He said, "Suddenly I'm a gray. The suit's gone off the wall, and he's a gray, and he's 3.5 feet tall now, and he's looking at his hands like, I'm a gray. What the heck's going on here?" And he walks down, and they take him into this almost like a council. You see the council of light, where they judge you after you're born, or they review your life. And he goes there, and they said, "Okay." And he said, "What am I doing here?" And he said, "It's time to get going." And he said, "Time to get going? What do you mean time to get going?" "It's time. It's time. The time's come." And he said, "Time for what?" And then they allowed him to remember that he had decided he was going to come and do these owl books. And he goes, "You never told me it was going to be like this. You never told me it was going to be this depressing. You never told me." And he starts swearing at him and yelling at him. And I can't believe that. I can't believe this. And then they said, "No, no, you volunteered for this. No, you volunteered for this." And then the thing ends. And 2 days later, he starts the first owl book. So you can see this whole thing. And then the whole idea is the basic premise is, Remember the Eastern tradition. Remember who you actually are. You are not the puppet on the stage. All the world's a stage. All the men and women are but actors. They have their entrances and exits. Each man plays many roles. You come here, read your lines, and leave the stage. You're going to play this puppet and you're going to play that puppet. You got to remember, you're not the puppet. I am not Grant Cameron. I am playing Grant Cameron the puppet. I am an etheric being that is one with the cosmos, that is one with the universe. And I have come here to play this role. And when I leave, I'll go. And in my next life, I won't even remember this life. So why get all upset about this life? All I have to do is worry about why I came into the world, and am I doing what I'm supposed to do? What other people do is totally irrelevant. So I'll leave it at that.